Section 1. Hey guys, tonight we're crawling into the itchy, pokey, not so feather soft world of medieval bedding. You're lying flat on a mattress that, if you're lucky, isn't full of beetles. If you're less lucky, well, you'll find out soon. We're talking straw, moss, and mystery lumps you'd rather not poke too hard. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your city and local time in the comments. I love seeing where, and when, you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk across the creaky floor of your 13th century cottage, every step sending up a puff of hay dust and the faint smell of damp wool. It's late, the hearth is glowing faintly, and your back has been reminding you for hours that a bed in this era is really more of a polite suggestion. Tonight, you're stuffing your mattress. Again. Because in the Middle Ages, your mattress doesn't arrive in a box with memory foam and a 100-night return policy. It arrives by scythe and pitchfork, freshly collected from the fields. Most people use straw, cheap, scratchy, and always slightly questionable. Nobles might upgrade to feathers or even rags soaked in lavender. You're using oat husks and last week's hay. And probably a little mouse or two, if they haven't moved out for winter. Historians still argue whether the effort to maintain these beds was daily, weekly, or strictly saved for when the smell could fight its way into church. What's clear is that comfort wasn't the point, keeping warm and off the ground was. Everything else was a luxury. And as you settle into your crinkly pile of pokey dreams, you mutter a bedtime prayer, not for rest, but that tonight, the straw mites don't bite. Section 2. You wake up, not so much rested as simply no longer unconscious. The straw beneath you is flattened in weird places, and something that was definitely alive skittered away when you shifted your foot an hour ago. It's another chilly medieval morning, and your bed, such as it is, has done its job, barely. As you sit up and try to rub the stiffness out of your spine, you glance around your tiny chamber. You live in what some modern real estate agent might call open-concept peasant living. Your bed is a sack of whatever you could gather, your pillow is a balled-up tunic, and if you're feeling fancy, your blanket is a woolen cloak that hasn't been washed since the last full moon. Now let's talk bedding maintenance, the chore that just never goes away. Changing the stuffing in your mattress isn't as simple as throwing sheets in the wash. You untie the linen sack, shake out what used to be plant material but now looks more like animal bedding, and start refilling it with fresh hay, moss, or ferns. Sometimes dried leaves if you're desperate. If it crackles too loudly, well, at least it keeps the ghosts away. Interestingly, not all sleeping arrangements involved a bed in the traditional sense. Some poorer folks simply laid rushes on the ground and curled up like a human burrito. Wealthier medieval households had feather beds layered on wooden frames, with bed curtains to keep out cold and prying eyes. These curtains weren't just for drama, they helped trap heat. And possibly smells. One record from a 15th century London household describes using down of swan and goose, well picked and softened by beating. That's right, you actually beat your feathers into submission. Because nothing says relaxation like whacking a pillow for 30 minutes with a wooden spoon. Scholars still debate whether such comforts were truly widespread, or whether most people just endured the rustic reality of straw and shivering. Some argue that feathery luxury was more symbolic, used in dowries or as social capital rather than actual comfort. But one thing is clear, sleep in medieval times was more about survival than slumber. And so, you finish refilling your mattress, give it a careful fluff, to evenly distribute the rodents, and collapse back into your upgraded pile of crunch. Is it better? Slightly. Is it soft? Not even close. But hey, at least the straw's still warm. Section 3. You shift under your scratchy blanket as the wind whistles through the cracks in the wooden walls. Outside, frost clings to the low shrubs, and your breath forms small clouds every time you exhale. It's still early, and your body screams at you to stay in bed. But that isn't how things work around here. The rooster's already crowed twice, and you've got chores. More accurately, your life is a never-ending loop of survival, repetition, and questionable hygiene practices. You finally roll out of your heap of straw, bones cracking like twigs, and pat across the creaky floor to throw on your work clothes, meaning the exact same ones you slept in. Medieval fashion isn't about style, it's about not freezing to death while herding sheep. As you step outside into the misty morning, your nose is immediately assaulted by a cocktail of barn smells, manure, hay, goat breath, and something you just hope isn't dead. The livestock are already complaining. And let's be honest, so are your joints. You trudge to the communal well, wooden bucket in hand, trying not to slip on the icy mud. Water isn't just something you drink, it's how you wash, cook, and maybe, if you're lucky, brush your teeth once a fortnight. The well is more than a utility. It's where you overhear the latest rumors, like who's secretly growing cabbage out of season or whose pig might be possessed. Drawing water requires effort. The bucket is heavy, and the rope creaks as you wind it back up. When you finally hoist it, the cold water splashes your boots. You mutter something that might be swearing, but you make sure no one hears. The village priest has a keen ear for ungodly expressions. Historians still argue whether peasants were genuinely devout or simply played along to avoid getting excommunicated and possibly torched. Religion is everywhere. There's a cross in your house, a priest in your business, and Sunday Mass that doubles as mandatory attendance and the only social event of the week. If you miss it, people assume you're hiding something, or dead. You lug the bucket back to your hut, arms shaking slightly. You warm some of it over the hearth, well, embers really, and splash your face. It helps. A little. Breakfast is humble, coarse rye bread, maybe a bit of onion if you're lucky. Butter? Forget it. That's for lords. You chew slowly, savoring every bite like it's a feast. Food is fuel, not flavor. And while we're here, let's talk about digestion. Forget modern plumbing. The village has a designated ditch. Yes, a ditch. And no, it's not scenic. If you're lucky, you might have access to a wooden privy, which is basically a glorified outhouse that smells like something crawled inside and died of regret. But it has a door. So that's luxury. Once you're refreshed, it's off to work. If you're a farmer and moster, you'll spend the entire day bent over in a field. Your tools? A wooden hoe and a sharp stick. Your gloves? Calluses. Your sunscreen? A hat, maybe. Or just hope. The sun burns, the rain soaks, and the wind slices through layers. And yet, here you are, day after day, scratching at the soil like it owes you something. But medieval agriculture isn't just drudgery. There's rhythm in it. Seasons guide your every move. You plant when the moon tells you, and harvest when your knees beg you to stop. You follow traditions passed down from parents who didn't live long enough to see you complain about it. And then there's the community. Everyone knows everyone, which sounds quaint until you realize that means everyone knows everything. Privacy? Not a chance. That time your chicken ran into the tavern and pooped on the ale barrel? Yeah, they still talk about it. Scholars still debate whether medieval villages were utopias of cooperation or hotbeds of gossip-fueled feuds. Likely, they were both. You share tools, bread, even firewood. But you also silently judge who isn't fasting properly during Lent. It's communal, but nosy. Lunchtime comes around, more bread, maybe some porridge, and if your neighbor traded well, a small hunk of cheese. You eat in the field, dirt under your nails and sweat dripping from your forehead. But it's quiet, and the birds are singing, and for a fleeting moment, you feel almost peaceful. In the afternoon, you mend fences, help with thatching someone's roof, or dig a new trench around the pigsty. Your muscles ache, your hands are raw, but the work doesn't stop. Ever. Eventually, you head back home, face streaked with grime. The sky glows orange, and the smoke from dozens of hearths paints soft trails into the dusk. You know there's still more to do: animals to feed, tools to clean, fire to stoke. But for now, you sit on your little stool by the door, take off your boots, and sigh. Your neighbor walks by, gives you a nod. No words, just mutual exhaustion. You both understand what it means to survive another day in this world. That's all it is, survival, softened by routine. You eat dinner slowly, more of the same, maybe a stew if there was anything left over from yesterday. You sip from a wooden cup of ale, weak and warm, but comforting. The fire crackles gently, and outside, the wind picks up. Bedtime comes early. You lie back onto your straw mattress, curl into yourself, and pull the blanket tight. Your body hurts in places you didn't even know had nerves. But you're alive. And that, in this time and place, is everything. As your eyes close, you think of tomorrow. You know it'll be the same, but there's a strange peace in that. A rhythm. A life shaped by the land, the sky, and the patience to endure. And as the fire dims and the stars blink into view above your thatched roof, you drift off, to dreams woven from straw and smoke and silence. Got it. Here comes section 4, in the same cozy, ASMR bedtime tone, written entirely in English, 2000 plus words, no document format. Section 4. You wake to the smell of something smoky. Not fire, exactly, more like damp wool and yesterday's supper reheated in a pan that's seen better centuries. Your eyes blink open, the morning light slipping between the crooked planks of the window shutter. The room is cold, again. Always cold. Even in warmer months, medieval mornings have a way of wrapping themselves around your bones like a damp towel left too long in the shade. You stretch, creaking like the wooden bed frame beneath you. The mattress, if you can call a stuffed sack that has lost its fluff long ago. Still, it beats sleeping on bare boards, or worse, the floor. Today, your task isn't farming, though. No plowing, no hay cutting, no mucking out goats. Today, you're headed into town. And that, believe it or not, is cause for excitement. You wash your face with cold water and don your most presentable tunic. Which, again, is just the least stained one. Clothes are rotated more like seasons than laundry cycles. Most peasants own 2 full outfits, one for daily work, and one for Sundays, weddings, or being judged in public. But medieval agriculture isn't just drudgery. There's rhythm in it. Seasons guide your every move. You plant when the moon tells you, and harvest when your knees beg you to stop. You follow traditions passed down from parents who didn't live long enough to see you complain about it. And then there's the community. Everyone knows everyone, which sounds quaint until you realize that means everyone knows everything. Privacy? Not a chance. That time your chicken ran into the tavern and pooped on the ale barrel? Yeah, they still talk about it. Scholars still debate whether medieval villages were utopias of cooperation or hotbeds of gossip-fueled feuds. Likely, they were both. You share tools, bread, even firewood. But you also silently judge who isn't fasting properly during Lent. It's communal, but nosy. Lunchtime comes around, more bread, maybe some porridge, and if your neighbor traded well, a small hunk of cheese. You eat in the field, dirt under your nails and sweat dripping from your forehead. But it's quiet, and the birds are singing, and for a fleeting moment, you feel almost peaceful. In the afternoon, you mend fences, help with thatching someone's roof, or dig a new trench around the pigsty. Your muscles ache, your hands are raw, but the work doesn't stop. Ever. Eventually, you head back home, face streaked with grime. The sky glows orange, and the smoke from dozens of hearths paints soft trails into the dusk. You know there's still more to do: animals to feed, tools to clean, fire to stoke. But for now, you sit on your little stool by the door, take off your boots, and sigh. Your neighbor walks by, gives you a nod. No words, just mutual exhaustion. You both understand what it means to survive another day in this world. That's all it is, survival, softened by routine. You eat dinner slowly, more of the same, maybe a stew if there was anything left over from yesterday. You sip from a wooden cup of ale, weak and warm, but comforting. The fire crackles gently, and outside, the wind picks up. Bedtime comes early. You lie back onto your straw mattress, curl into yourself, and pull the blanket tight. Your body hurts in places you didn't even know had nerves. But you're alive. And that, in this time and place, is everything. As your eyes close, you think of tomorrow. You know it'll be the same, but there's a strange peace in that. A rhythm. A life shaped by the land, the sky, and the patience to endure. And as the fire dims and the stars blink into view above your thatched roof, you drift off, to dreams woven from straw and smoke and silence. Got it. Here comes section 4, in the same cozy, ASMR bedtime tone, written entirely in English, 2000 plus words, no document format. Section 4. You wake to the smell of something smoky. Not fire, exactly, more like damp wool and yesterday's supper reheated in a pan that's seen better centuries. Your eyes blink open, the morning light slipping between the crooked planks of the window shutter. The room is cold, again. Always cold. Even in warmer months, medieval mornings have a way of wrapping themselves around your bones like a damp towel left too long in the shade. You stretch, creaking like the wooden bed frame beneath you. The mattress, if you can call a stuffed sack that has lost its fluff long ago. Still, it beats sleeping on bare boards, or worse, the floor. Today, your task isn't farming, though. No plowing, no hay cutting, no mucking out goats. Today, you're headed into town. And that, believe it or not, is cause for excitement. You wash your face with cold water and don your most presentable tunic. Which, again, is just the least stained one. Clothes are rotated more like seasons than laundry cycles. Most peasants own 2 full outfits, one for daily work, and one for Sundays, weddings, or being judged in public. You stop by a church on the way out. Not because you're particularly devout, but because everyone does. You light a candle, mumble a prayer, and hope the priest doesn't ask you for another tithe. He doesn't. He's too busy scolding a boy for drawing something anatomically creative in the margins of a psalter. Scholars still debate how influential the church truly was in day-to-day life. Was it feared? Revered? Or just tolerated, like the flies in your soup? As you walk out of town, the sun dips low. The path home is quieter now, the trees casting long shadows across the road. You pass a woman carrying a sack of turnips. You nod. She nods. This is medieval etiquette. By the time you reach your hut, the sky is painted in shades of violet and ash. The chickens greet you with indifference. You feed them anyway. You sit by the fire again. Your body aches less than usual, maybe because your spirit is full of stories, and your pockets aren't completely empty. Supper is humble. Bread, again. A scrap of meat, if you're lucky. You savor it slowly, letting the salt and smoke linger on your tongue. Night falls like a blanket. You crawl into bed, yes, that same itchy, straw-stuffed sack, and pull your woolen blanket up to your chin. And you realize something. For all its grime, noise, and unpredictability, the town gave you something rare, a glimpse of the wider world. A flash of magic hidden behind manure and market stalls. A reminder that, even in an age of mud and superstition, people still told jokes, dreamed big, and traded rumors like treasure. You close your eyes, the memory of lute music echoing faintly in your ears. You let it carry you away, to sleep, to tomorrow, to whatever the next market day brings. Section 5. You wake before the sun, as usual. But this morning, there's something in the air, a stillness, as though the wind has decided to sleep in. Your breath floats in front of you as you swing your legs over the side of the bed. Cold again. Always cold. Your toes land on the packed earth floor, stiff with frost. You stretch, rubbing your arms, and pull on yesterday's tunic, which has frozen into the vague shape of a person overnight. Today, you're not going to town. Today is soap day. Yes, soap. That rare and precious commodity. The thing that nobles pretend to use regularly, and peasants only dream of. Making it is an ordeal, but one that feels oddly satisfying. You collect the ingredients like a sorcerer preparing a spell: rendered animal fat, wood ash, water. The result is not fragrant. It is not gentle. But it is clean, and in medieval terms, that's a miracle. You start with a fire. The hearth coughs to life, crackling reluctantly. You drop the ashes from last week's fire into a wooden bucket, pour water over them, and let the mixture sit. This creates lye, a substance so caustic it could probably clean sin. Historians still argue whether lye was discovered by accident or divine punishment. Either way, it works. Next comes the fat. You scrape the congealed substance from a pot you kept hidden from the dogs. It smells. Committed. You mix the lye and fat together in a clay bowl, stirring slowly, watching the slurry thicken into something vaguely soap-like. It will need days to harden. Weeks, if the humidity argues. As you work, a neighbor stops by. His name is Ellis, and he smells faintly of sheep. He offers to trade you a handful of onions for a sliver of your soap when it's done. You accept. The onions are crooked, but alive. Like most of your neighbors. Ellis mentions he heard about a distant village where people use boiled moss instead of soap. You both laugh. Then pause. Then shrug. It might actually work. Your hands are raw now. Lye is not gentle on skin. You rinse in a nearby basin, then smear some goose fat to soothe the burn. It helps. Barely. Section 7. You've spent some time among the hay-stuffed beds and soot-covered hearths. Now, step outside. Not into a royal court or a battlefield, but into something far more dangerous, a medieval kitchen. You duck through a narrow stone doorway, into a small, smoky room that somehow feels warmer than the rest of the house, and not in a pleasant way. There's a fire roaring in the giant open hearth, and the scent of onions, smoke, and questionable meat hangs thick in the air. You're here to help with dinner, and no one is entirely sure if tonight's stew will feed the family or send them sprinting to the outhouse. Let's start with what's bubbling in the pot. It's called pottage, a kind of slow-cooked mash of whatever is on hand: barley, leeks, beans, dried peas, cabbage, and, if you're fortunate today, a sliver of salt pork. The trick is that it never really starts or ends. Families just keep adding things to the pot, sometimes for days, sometimes for weeks. It's the eternal soup. The immortal dinner. You stir, and you're stirring history itself. A mouse scampers across the rafters above you. You ignore it, because everyone does. Instead, you eye the round of cheese in the corner. It's coated in ash and has a suspicious green hue. But it's either eat that or lose calories you can't afford. You take a nibble. It's tangy. And fuzzy. The open fire is doing more than cooking, it's smoking everything, including your clothes and your lungs. But this smoke serves a purpose. It preserves meat hung overhead, keeps bugs out of flour, and gives the kitchen that delightful burnt wool meets cabbage aroma. It also might slowly kill you. Historians still argue whether indoor hearth smoke was more dangerous than any medieval disease. Your host drops in a few herbs from the windowsill. A touch of sage, some rosemary, a mystery leaf no one questions. Flavor in medieval food was a battle of survival between taste and rot. You don't season for preference, you season to mask decay. And while we're here, let's debunk a myth. Medieval folks didn't actually eat rotten meat on purpose. That's a modern exaggeration. But did they eat meat that modern people might consider past its prime? Absolutely. Because that's what was available, and because food waste wasn't just rude, it was life-threatening. There's no fridge. No freezer. No expiration date stickers. Just a keen nose, inherited instincts, and a prayer to Saint Martha, patroness of cooks and apparently poor digestive choices. Tonight, the family gathers around the hearth, bowls in hand. There's no formal dining table. They sit on stools, on the floor, or wherever they fit. You take your place, bowl steaming, eyes watering from the smoke, and your stomach rumbling more from habit than hope. And just as you take a cautious bite, someone sneezes directly into the pot. You eat anyway. Because in medieval kitchens, the menu never changes, whatever is available, served with smoke, boiled with hope. Section 8. You crouch in the corner of a dimly lit room, your fingers brushing across a worn wooden floor as muffled voices drift in from the next chamber. Welcome to the medieval healer's house, equal parts mystery, miracle, and mildew. In an age where a simple fever could take you out quicker than a sword, people didn't just rely on prayer, they also relied on pungent poultices, jars of leeches, and the occasional sniff of burnt toadskin. Yep, you're really here. You move slowly, careful not to knock over a table stacked high with clay pots and dried herbs. There's lavender and rosemary hanging from the rafters, though whether for healing or just to mask the stench, it's hard to tell. A battered book of remedies lies open nearby. It's handwritten, naturally, because the printing press won't be around for another few centuries. The ink has bled with age, and you can just make out a recipe that calls for mashed garlic, sheep urine, and blessed moonlight. Section 7. You've spent some time among the hay-stuffed beds and soot-covered hearths. Now, step outside. Not into a royal court or a battlefield, but into something far more dangerous, a medieval kitchen. You duck through a narrow stone doorway, into a small, smoky room that somehow feels warmer than the rest of the house, and not in a pleasant way. There's a fire roaring in the giant open hearth, and the scent of onions, smoke, and questionable meat hangs thick in the air. You're here to help with dinner, and no one is entirely sure if tonight's stew will feed the family or send them sprinting to the outhouse. Let's start with what's bubbling in the pot. It's called pottage, a kind of slow-cooked mash of whatever is on hand: barley, leeks, beans, dried peas, cabbage, and, if you're fortunate today, a sliver of salt pork. The trick is that it never really starts or ends. Families just keep adding things to the pot, sometimes for days, sometimes for weeks. It's the eternal soup. The immortal dinner. You stir, and you're stirring history itself. A mouse scampers across the rafters above you. You ignore it, because everyone does. Instead, you eye the round of cheese in the corner. It's coated in ash and has a suspicious green hue. But it's either eat that or lose calories you can't afford. You take a nibble. It's tangy. And fuzzy. The open fire is doing more than cooking, it's smoking everything, including your clothes and your lungs. But this smoke serves a purpose. It preserves meat hung overhead, keeps bugs out of flour, and gives the kitchen that delightful burnt wool meets cabbage aroma. It also might slowly kill you. Historians still argue whether indoor hearth smoke was more dangerous than any medieval disease. Your host drops in a few herbs from the windowsill. A touch of sage, some rosemary, a mystery leaf no one questions. Flavor in medieval food was a battle of survival between taste and rot. You don't season for preference, you season to mask decay. And while we're here, let's debunk a myth. Medieval folks didn't actually eat rotten meat on purpose. That's a modern exaggeration. But did they eat meat that modern people might consider past its prime? Absolutely. Because that's what was available, and because food waste wasn't just rude, it was life-threatening. There's no fridge. No freezer. No expiration date stickers. Just a keen nose, inherited instincts, and a prayer to Saint Martha, patroness of cooks and apparently poor digestive choices. Tonight, the family gathers around the hearth, bowls in hand. There's no formal dining table. They sit on stools, on the floor, or wherever they fit. You take your place, bowl steaming, eyes watering from the smoke, and your stomach rumbling more from habit than hope. And just as you take a cautious bite, someone sneezes directly into the pot. You eat anyway. Because in medieval kitchens, the menu never changes, whatever is available, served with smoke, boiled with hope. Section 8. You crouch in the corner of a dimly lit room, your fingers brushing across a worn wooden floor as muffled voices drift in from the next chamber. Welcome to the medieval healer's house, equal parts mystery, miracle, and mildew. In an age where a simple fever could take you out quicker than a sword, people didn't just rely on prayer, they also relied on pungent poultices, jars of leeches, and the occasional sniff of burnt toad skin. Yep, you're really here. You move slowly, careful not to knock over a table stacked high with clay pots and dried herbs. There's lavender and rosemary hanging from the rafters, though whether for healing or just to mask the stench, it's hard to tell. A battered book of remedies lies open nearby. It's handwritten, naturally, because the printing press won't be around for another few centuries. The ink has bled with age, and you can just make out a recipe that calls for mashed garlic, sheep urine, and blessed moonlight. You tiptoe toward a tall cabinet. Inside are more jars, one filled with honey, another with ashes, and a third with a murky yellow substance you choose not to identify. Historians still argue whether many of these concoctions were based on real observation or were simply the result of creative desperation. Either way, you respect the medieval effort to treat illness without anesthesia, sterilization, or a firm grasp of germ theory. Brave, or wildly optimistic. A gentle breeze drifts in through a shuttered window, rustling the parchment pages of an anatomical sketch. It's vaguely human-shaped, with notes scribbled in Latin. You glance at a nearby figure, possibly a mannequin, possibly an unlucky patient wrapped tightly in bandages and smelling faintly of vinegar. The healer finally steps in. She's middle-aged, with sleeves rolled up and a serious expression. She gestures for you to sit. You do, and she immediately begins to smear a thick green paste across your forehead. For balance, she mutters. It smells like rotten cabbage mixed with pine. You smile politely, trying not to gag. Outside, a sick child cries while someone sharpens a knife. No one said healing was serene. But despite the questionable tools, you can sense genuine care here. There's empathy in every clumsy treatment, even if it involves beetles and prayer. You learn that many treatments were heavily influenced by astrology. A good healer might refuse to treat a fever on a Tuesday because Mars was ascendant and Mars, apparently, hated sick people. Others swore by balancing bodily humors blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile using diet, purging, or bloodletting. Quackery? Maybe. But remember, these healers had no microscopes, no labs, no X-rays. What they had was centuries of trial and error, oral tradition, and a deep need to help their communities survive. As the sun sets, the healer presses a pungent herb bundle into your hand and whispers a prayer in Old English. You don't understand a word, but somehow, it's comforting. You feel better. Or maybe just dizzy from the fumes. You step out into the cooling evening, past bundles of nettles and garlic strung like protective charms. The air feels fresher, lighter. In the distance, bells chime vespers, and your thoughts drift to whether that green paste might cure headaches or cause them. Section 9. You find yourself standing in a medieval kitchen, not the smoky hearth of a peasant's hut, but the high-ceilinged, stone-walled kitchen of a wealthy household. The first thing that hits you is the smell: sharp herbs, bubbling stews, the faint tang of smoked fish. You can almost hear the clatter of knives, the bubbling of pots suspended over open flames, the rhythmic chop of a cleaver on a well-worn wooden block. A scullery maid rushes by, her apron stained with beet juice and something that might be eel ink. Medieval cooking is far more advanced than it gets credit for. Sure, there's no refrigerator, but the spice racks? Exotic. There's cinnamon from Ceylon, pepper from India, cloves from Zanzibar. And it's not just for flavor, these were signs of wealth, power, and global connection. Spices were currency. Some were worth more than gold. You approach a massive oak table where a cook is pounding almonds into a paste. She's making a fake meat pie not for vegetarians, but for Lent. It's all about illusions. Your goose might actually be shaped marzipan. That beef stew? Just dyed fish in disguise. It's culinary cosplay. And here's the thing historians still debate: was this done just to skirt religious rules, or was it also entertainment? Some argue medieval cuisine was performative, dinner was theater. Dishes came out shaped like castles, like dragons, like swans. It wasn't just a meal, it was a spectacle. As the cook tosses dried rose petals into a simmering broth, you catch the whiff of something unexpectedly modern. You'd expect the Middle Ages to be all stale bread and gruel, but here you are watching someone infuse almond milk with cardamom. Not bad. You move into the pantry, which smells like damp grain and hope. Shelves of preserved goods line the walls: pickled turnips, smoked sausages, dried apples. There's a delicate balance here. Without preservation, winter was lean. The art of medieval food storage, root cellars, salting, fermenting, was crucial. Lose a harvest, and your whole village starves. Somewhere above, you hear a lute playing. The lord and lady are dining, and the kitchen must work in perfect harmony. Timing matters. The meat must be hot, the sauces fresh, the wine poured at just the right moment. You notice a young boy whose only job is to taste for poison. A necessary occupation in the backstabby world of feudal politics. There's also debate around how nutritious all this was. Some scholars say medieval elites had varied diets: meat, fish, fruit, grains. Others argue the obsession with white bread and sugar led to early dental disasters. Regardless, food was deeply symbolic. What you ate said who you were. You sneak a small bite of roasted turnip. It's shockingly good. And as you slip back through the stone archway into the cool corridor beyond, you realize, in the medieval world, the kitchen was not just about sustenance, it was about power, performance, and survival. Section 10. You can almost smell it: stale rushes, damp wool, the slightly sweet scent of something stewing. You've entered a medieval kitchen, one of the most important yet least glamorous parts of daily life. Here, behind the thick stone walls of manor houses or monasteries, food wasn't just nourishment. It was labor, ritual, and, sometimes, status. You kneel beside a large hearth, where smoke curls up toward the rafters but never quite finds its way out. Chimneys aren't universal yet, so most rooms are clouded in a soft, greasy fog. Hanging from the iron spit, a chunk of pork turning slowly, while a boy, maybe 10 years old, sits beside it, hand cranking like his life depends on it. And, in a way, it does. The turning spit boy is a real job. Historians still argue whether it was the worst kitchen task, or just the most soul-crushingly boring. You glance around. There are no tomatoes, no potatoes, and definitely no sugar. Those come later. Instead, you see cabbages, onions, leeks, dried peas, humble staples. Bread, always bread, forms the core of every meal. If you're lucky, it's made with wheat. If not, it's a rough blend of rye or barley, maybe even mashed acorns. Grain quality divides classes as clearly as clothing ever could. Now someone passes you a trencher. It's not a plate, it's a stale slice of bread, carved thick and flat. Onto this go stews, meat scraps, gravy. When you're done eating, your trencher might go to the poor, or to the dogs. Either way, it's not wasted. The cook adds spices: pepper, cumin, cloves, maybe a dash of saffron. Spices are expensive and often used more to show off wealth than to enhance flavor. There's a popular myth that they were used to cover the taste of rotting meat. But historians push back on that. If you're rich enough to buy saffron, you're not serving spoiled pork. In the corner, a pot simmers with pottage, a never-ending stew of grains, vegetables, and leftovers. It changes by the hour and tastes better than it looks. Which isn't saying much. Occasionally, you hear tales of the gourmet monks. Certain abbeys in France and Italy became known for their decadent meals: eel pies, almond milk stews, even imported figs. Some argue this culinary excess betrayed monastic vows. Others suggest these monasteries preserved vital cooking techniques through the Dark Ages. You ponder this as a kitchen maid walks by with a basket of eggs. Not all are chicken, some are duck, some goose. She grumbles about how the Lord prefers his boiled exactly 7 minutes. You stifle a laugh. Even in a world without clocks, picky eaters exist. Let's not forget drinks. Beer isn't just for celebration, it's daily hydration. Water isn't always safe, and beer, even weak ale, provides a cleaner alternative. Children drink it, pregnant women drink it, even monks brew it. Now, you lean against the wall and sigh. Life in the medieval kitchen is messy, smoky, and utterly essential. It feeds a household, reflects a hierarchy, and if you're lucky, leaves you full. Section 11. You find yourself navigating the damp wooden corridors of a medieval bathhouse, steam curling from tubs that look more like barrels than anything luxurious. Contrary to what you might have heard, medieval folks weren't all allergic to cleanliness. In fact, bathhouses were quite the rage, at least for a while. You sit on a bench slick with moisture, watching someone stir herbs into hot water, like preparing soup for the soul. In cities like Paris, Cologne, or even Baghdad, public bathhouses weren't just tolerated, they were part of the community fabric. Soap made of ash and animal fat, sometimes scented with lavender or rosemary, was common. And yet, as you relax in this steamy haze, a monk somewhere is probably giving a sermon on the dangers of public nudity. Hygiene versus heresy, classic medieval tension. Let's not forget the social side of it. These places were buzzing hubs where gossip flowed faster than the water. You could get your hair trimmed, hear town rumors, and maybe meet someone you probably shouldn't be meeting if you're married. It wasn't just about getting clean. It was about catching up with people, with politics, with yourself. Historians still argue whether medieval bathhouses were more about spiritual cleansing or social networking. Some even suggest they contributed to outbreaks of disease, while others argue the opposite, they were vital in slowing the spread. But then came the fear. The Black Death turned every communal space into a potential death trap. Bathhouses were shuttered. Soap lost its charm. Suddenly, being squeaky clean didn't seem worth the risk. You sigh, watching the steam dissipate, as if history itself is evaporating. Still, for a brief golden age, the bathhouse was where body and spirit were both rejuvenated. It's warm, a bit awkward, deeply human. And now that you know this, you'll never look at a medieval tub the same way again. Section 12. You step into a medieval kitchen, not the royal kind with gilded utensils and 10-course feasts, but a humble village setup where fire crackles under a soot-stained pot. There's a woman grinding barley with a stone, her sleeves rolled up, face red from the heat. Dinner tonight? Probably pottage. Again. Pottage was the Swiss Army knife of medieval meals. Throw in grains, maybe beans, add whatever vegetables didn't rot yet, and if luck's on your side, a scrap of meat. That's the charm of it, you're never quite sure what today's flavor will be. You sip it cautiously. Earthy. Warm. Familiar. Yet the kitchen isn't just about food. It's a site of survival, invention, and subtle resistance. Peasants stretched ingredients to the limit. Did you know they used fermented fish paste to stretch salt? Or added tree bark to bulk up bread? You chuckle at how creative hunger can be. Now glance over to the corner, someone stirring a thick mixture in a wooden bowl, early attempts at cheese. It smells alive. But hey, protein is protein. Meanwhile, drying herbs hang like garlands from the ceiling. Lavender to calm. Rosemary for flavor. Yarrow for wounds. This isn't just a place to eat, it's also a pharmacy. Historians still argue whether these home kitchens were primarily women's domains or collective community spaces. Some say they were seats of silent power, where matriarchs ruled the hearth like queens. Others argue the lines were blurrier than we think. A knock at the door interrupts the rhythm. It's a neighbor with a bowl, hoping to borrow a bit of that onion stock. You nod. It's a barter economy, after all. 1 spoon for you today, 1 spoon for them tomorrow. By the time the fire dims, you realize something beautiful: these kitchens, smoky and cramped, were cradles of care. Love was stewed slowly, not shouted aloud. And as the scent of garlic and thyme lingers, you find yourself smiling. Section 13. You make your way toward the village square, the social heart of any medieval town, not grand or paved, but a simple open space rimmed with timber-framed shops and homes, their upper floors jutting out like elbows in a tight crowd. You can hear the steady murmur of voices, the clang of metal, and the occasional bleeding goat thrown into the symphony of daily life. The square is alive. Children chase each other barefoot over the packed dirt. A baker shouts out fresh loaves, their crusts crackling in the morning sun. The town crier rings his bell, a human newsletter reading aloud everything from royal proclamations to lost chickens. And right in the middle? A wooden platform, ominously empty, used for everything from theatrical performances to public punishments. Today, it's market day. You weave between stalls. A woman is selling hand-woven baskets, her fingers calloused and quick. Next to her, a man sells leeches in jars, swearing they cure headaches. Someone offers you a sample of mead, sweet, fermented honey dancing on your tongue like lazy sunshine. Markets weren't just for goods. They were the internet of the medieval world: gossip, matchmaking, politics, all buzzing through whispered conversations. You overhear a farmer complaining about drought. Another whispers rumors of war to the east. Meanwhile, an old woman tells fortunes with bones and murmured prayers. What catches your attention, though, is the barter. Coins exist, sure, but here, a pair of boots can trade for a dozen eggs. A song for a cup of ale. A favor for a slab of bacon. You watch a silent exchange of goods and nods, and it feels human. Gentle. Messy. You pause by a blacksmith's stall. Sparks dance as he shapes iron with rhythmic grace. He wipes his brow, then gestures to a pile of horseshoes. You didn't come to buy one, but he insists you take it for luck, he says. You tuck it into your satchel, just in case. Historians still argue whether these communal spaces helped unite townsfolk or amplified existing hierarchies. Was the square a true center of equality, or a stage for subtle control? You consider this as a minor dispute flares over a spilled sack of turnips and resolves just as quickly with laughter. As the sun leans westward, the smells of fried dough and wood smoke hang thick in the air. Musicians begin tuning their lutes. A juggler warms up with apples. You realize that in this simple square, life is compact and complete. Loud, imperfect, but rich with human warmth. Section 14. You leap behind the clamor of the market and wander down a quieter lane, its cobblestones uneven beneath your feet, leading toward one of the town's lesser-known but vital places, the bathhouse. Contrary to popular myth, medieval folks weren't entirely allergic to hygiene. They might not have had showers or bubble baths, but communal washing spots were common and oddly sociable. The building creaks as you enter a timber-framed structure with steam curling through the cracks in the walls. The scent hits first, a strange but not unpleasant mix of warm water, ash soap, and crushed herbs like mint and chamomile. Inside, light filters through a high, grimy window, illuminating the mist like a holy glow. There's a pool in the center, not large, but enough for half a dozen people. Wooden benches line the walls. Two women are scrubbing laundry on flat stones in one corner while an older man dozes with a cloth over his eyes. You sit, toes barely touching the warm water, and breathe in the quiet. Bathhouses, especially in towns with Roman roots, were a holdover from earlier times. Heated by stone furnaces and lined with lead or tiled basins, they were both practical and pleasurable. They offered warmth in winter, privacy when needed, and sometimes even meals. Soup with your soak wasn't unheard of. But they weren't just about cleaning bodies. They cleaned reputations, too. Deals were struck here. Matches arranged. Secrets whispered through the steam. And occasionally, scandal. You glance toward a curtained alcove and raise an eyebrow. The truth is, bathhouses flirted with the boundaries of morality. In some towns, they were regulated or outright banned by religious authorities, especially when co-ed sessions got too cozy. Historians still argue whether bathhouses helped public health or posed risks. Were they sanctuaries of sanitation or breeding grounds for disease? The answer, as always, is probably yes to both. A boy enters with a bundle of fresh linen, interrupting your thoughts. He nods politely before setting them near the fire to warm. You smile at the simple comfort, warm towels in cold seasons, steam loosening tired muscles, and the shared humanity of caring for one's body even when water had to be hauled bucket by bucket. As you rise to leave, your skin tingling from the heat, you feel oddly refreshed. Not just clean, but softened, inside and out. The bathhouse wasn't a luxury here. It was a ritual. A pause. A quiet defiance against the grime of daily life. And stepping back into the street, cloak damp around your shoulders, you carry that warmth like a hidden ember. Section 15. The street winds down to the edge of town, where things grow a little quieter and the air takes on a different scent, something earthy, tinged with charcoal and iron. You follow it instinctively, past crooked fences and sagging roofs, until you arrive at the smithy. Even from outside, you can hear it, the steady clang, clang, clang of hammer on metal. It's almost musical, a heartbeat of industry in a town that rarely sleeps deeply. Inside, it's hotter than any hearth you've visited. The walls seem to sweat, and your eyes need a moment to adjust to the glow of the forge. Sparks fly as the blacksmith, a burly woman with soot-covered arms, raises her hammer high and brings it down with practiced force. She barely glances at you, too focused on the glowing horseshoe on her anvil. Metal bends here. So do expectations. In medieval towns, blacksmiths weren't just farriers and nail-makers. They were essential crafting tools for harvest, hinges for doors, iron grills for windows, and weapons when tensions rose. Every village depended on someone like this, part artist, part engineer, part magician. Because there was, after all, something alchemical about turning cold iron into something useful. Something lasting. You watch as she plunges the red-hot iron into a trough of water, and the room fills with that familiar hiss and plume of steam. The sound feels final. Like punctuation. Near the back wall, a series of oddly shaped tools hang from hooks, pliers, chisels, curling rods you can't name. Each one made by hand, for a hand. Blacksmithing was personalized in a way modern factories have all but forgotten. There's a small crucible heating in the coals. She's melting down bits of scrap old nails, broken tools, to forge something new. Nothing was wasted. Even rust had potential. But here's a curious thing: in some parts of medieval Europe, blacksmiths were feared as much as they were respected. Seen as keepers of dangerous secrets, capable of binding spirits with iron or fashioning charms to ward off evil. In Celtic folklore, iron repelled fey creatures. In Christian towns, it symbolized toil and protection. You stand in a place where myth and muscle intersect. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths held spiritual roles in their communities or were simply skilled tradespeople who gained a bit of mystique from the forge's glow. Perhaps both. A child bursts in with a broken belt buckle. The blacksmith sighs but beckons the boy forward. She doesn't speak much, but her hands say enough. Tap. Turn. Fix. The belt will live to hold up trousers another day. You step back outside just as the sun begins to set, casting the town in amber light. Behind you, the hammer resumes its rhythm. And for the first time in a while, you realize how much work goes into simply keeping a town upright, how much quiet labor, how many burnt fingers and aching backs. The forge keeps no secrets. It simply burns, shapes, and endures. Section 16. As the last ember of sunlight fades behind the horizon, your steps take you toward a part of the town that most folks avoid after dark, not because it's dangerous, but because it's quiet in a way that feels final. You approach the graveyard. Unlike the Gothic horror of later centuries, medieval cemeteries are humble, even comforting. Moss-covered stones lean at odd angles, and wooden markers erode into soft anonymity. Some graves are outlined with flowers, marigolds, yarrow, whatever grew nearby. The soil is uneven. Life, even in death, resists symmetry. A gravedigger, thin and stooped, tips his cap to you. His hands are black with soil. "Rain's coming," he says, almost like a spell. You nod. It always is. But death in the Middle Ages isn't quite what you expected. Yes, it's omnipresent: plague, famine, childbirth, but it's also woven into everyday rhythms. People don't hide from it. They pray through it. Eat near it. Joke about it. Build around it. Tonight, you're here to witness not a funeral, but a soul supper, a quiet ritual held at the edge of Allhallowtide. A family has gathered around a low fire, sharing bread and beer beside a relative's grave. They murmur blessings between bites, offering food to the departed in hopes of easing their journey. You're not sure if the dead can eat, but the living clearly need the gesture. Nearby, a child runs between graves, laughing. No one scolds her. And here's where it gets weirder: in some parts of medieval Europe, people hired sin-eaters, outcasts paid to consume food left on a dead person's chest, symbolically absorbing their sins. Others rang bells to ward off spirits, or buried loved ones with a slice of bread in their pocket, just in case the afterlife had a toll booth. Historians still debate whether these were sincere beliefs or theatrical leftovers from older, pagan rites. Was the bread for comfort or a bribe? You sit by one of the older markers, reading the faint inscription. It's in Latin, but the dates tell the story: a life shortened, then remembered. Someone once loved this person enough to carve their name into stone. That alone feels like resistance against forgetting. Crows settle onto the eaves of the chapel behind you. They're not ominous. Just nosy. From the chapel, a monk emerges, carrying a candle and a small bell. He walks the rows slowly, ringing once at each grave. A way of saying, "We still remember." You follow behind at a respectful distance. The light flickers on the graves, turning stone into shadow puppets. Death here isn't cinematic. It's quiet. Tender. A rhythm, not a rupture. By the time you leave, the air is thick with dew, and your boots leave darker prints in the dirt. The family finishes their meal. Someone says a name aloud. Just the name. And suddenly the graveyard doesn't feel so empty. Section 17. You're drawn now to a place of clatter and clang, the blacksmith's forge. It's the beating heart of any medieval town, both literally and symbolically. As you step closer, the rhythmic pounding of hammer on metal vibrates through your chest. Sparks fly in bursts like miniature fireworks, disappearing into the soot-darkened air. Inside, it's an oven. Heat rolls out in waves, thick and gritty. The smith, a broad-shouldered figure with arms like tree trunks, barely notices. His brow drips with sweat, but his hands are steady, measured. You watch him work the bellows, coaxing the flames to roar louder. Iron glows orange, then yellow, then blinding white. He turns to you briefly and nods toward a rack of finished tools. Horseshoes. Sickle blades. Nails. A sword, but only one. Mostly, it's stuff for life, not battle. Blacksmiths were less about war and more about making the world hold together. There's a strange poetry in it, shaping raw, stubborn metal into something useful, something enduring. Even the tools he uses are forged by his own hand. It's a closed loop of mastery. Today, he's fixing a broken plowshare for a farmer. As he hammers, he mutters a rhyme, not quite a prayer, not quite a joke. Strong as oak, sharp as tongue, may this blade work all season long. You can't help but grin. Here's a lesser-known twist: blacksmiths were often considered a little magical. In some villages, they were believed to keep away evil spirits because they controlled fire and metal. Some wore iron rings not just for decoration, but for protection. Iron had power. Still does, maybe. In fact, there are stories of babies being passed over the anvil to ward off sickness. Horseshoes nailed over doors to prevent witchcraft. Some even say smiths were the last to speak with gods of thunder. Historians argue about just how widespread these beliefs were. Some say they lingered only in rural pockets. Others believe this blend of superstition and practicality was the blacksmith's true inheritance. The forge itself is more than a workplace. It's a community center. People drop by not just for tools, but for gossip, matchmaking, even songs. The smith sings a few bars of a tune older than the town itself. You don't recognize the words, but the melody is comforting. You notice a boy sweeping the floor, eyes wide with wonder. An apprentice. He holds a small hammer awkwardly, mimicking every movement of his master. Give him 5 years, and he'll swing with purpose. Give him 10, and the town might depend on him. You sit near the doorway where the heat softens into warmth. Outside, a farmer waits for the plow. Inside, history is being forged one stroke at a time. And as the sparks crackle, you realize the beauty isn't just in the fire. It's in the patience. The repetition. The trust that something battered can become whole again. Section 18. Now you find yourself at the edge of the village where the noise softens and the smell of iron gives way to something earthier, a tanner's yard. It's not glamorous, in fact, your nose wrinkles before your feet even cross the threshold. The air is thick with the scent of urine, lime, and something more primal. But beneath the stink lies a surprisingly sophisticated operation. You see hides stretched taut across wooden frames, their edges pegged like parchment on display. A man in stained leather tunic is scraping fur from a hide using a crescent-shaped blade. His motions are steady, practiced, even graceful. You'd never expect elegance here, but here it is. This is the place where skin becomes substance. Every belt, boot, pouch, and saddle starts here, soaked and stinking. The transformation from rawhide to wearable art is alchemical. Not romantic alchemy, the sweaty, backbreaking kind. And here's a detail few talk about: many of the tanning agents came from dog dung and human urine, collected daily from the village's chamber pots. There's even a special term for it: chamber lye. You smirk. Medieval recycling at its finest. The tanner's assistant hauls a bucket of sloshing fluid with all the enthusiasm of someone hauling liquid nightmares. But still, he whistles. People adapt. Over by the racks, leather goods hang drying under the sun. Some dyed with walnut husk, others darkened with soot. These aren't luxury items, they're survival gear. Tough enough to last seasons. Soft enough not to chafe. and in colder climates, essential for survival. One corner of the yard has a pile of discarded scraps, some chewed by rats, others curled like dried leaves. A child picks through them, perhaps hoping to stitch a doll's shoes or trade a strip for bread. Scholars debate whether tanners were outcasts or artisans. In some towns, their yards were pushed to the outskirts, far from markets and churches. But in others, they held steady status, providing a product no one could live without. Was it smell that made them outsiders, or social superstition? Interestingly, leatherwork also touched lives you wouldn't expect. Monks used fine calfskin vellum for illuminated manuscripts. Warriors wore hardened leather armor. Even pilgrims wrapped their relics in leather pouches. From cradle to grave, leather was part of every journey. You lean on a fence, watching as another fresh hide is hauled in raw, damp, and reeking. In a few days, it will become a pair of shoes. Or reins for a mule. Or a sheath for someone's knife. A quiet industry, smelly but essential. And one layered with invisible threads of trade, biology, and unspoken gratitude. You wouldn't want to live next to a tannery. But you'd miss it if it were gone. The tanner wipes sweat from his brow, looks up at you, and smiles. It's not pretty, he says, but it holds the world together. And in that moment, surrounded by decay in Section 19, you follow a path behind the village tannery until the scenery softens, less grime, more green. Now you're at the edge of the commons, where the herbwives and cunning folk set up makeshift stalls and gather beneath the crooked trees. This is not the bustling marketplace but something older, stranger, half trade post, half folklore nursery. A woman with silver-threaded hair is hunched over a bundle of dried nettles. She looks up and gestures toward her satchel. You lean in. Inside are jars, crushed chamomile, dried poppy, marigold, wormwood. It's a walking apothecary. No license. No parchment. Just knowledge passed from whisper to whisper. You sit cross-legged as she brews a tea. The smell is sharp, fennel and sage. She explains that this helps clear the phlegm of a sour day. You sip. It tastes like a meadow sneezed in your mouth. But don't laugh. In a world without pharmacies, these women were the closest thing to doctors. They pulled teeth, stitched wounds, calmed fevers, even helped ease childbirth pains. Some used astrology. Others relied on dream interpretation. And nearly all of them relied on plants. Did you know that yarrow was used to stop bleeding in both battlefield wounds and nosebleeds? Or that mugwort was thought to protect against evil spirits? You didn't? Well, now you do. The more you look, the more magic and medicine blur together. At the base of a hollow oak, another woman mutters over a bowl of oil and floating herbs. She's making a charm, she says, something to keep away nightmares. Is it placebo? Is it power of belief? Historians still argue whether these rituals had true effect or were communal theater designed to soothe. But villagers believed. That belief, woven deep into everyday survival, gave these herbwives authority and caution. Too much success, and they'd be revered. Too much mystery, and they'd be feared. You wonder how many walked the line between healer and heretic. One record from the 14th century shows a woman fined for improper cure of gout with frog parts and leechings. Another was praised for curing a bishop's infection using honey, garlic, and dried plum. Same herbs. Different luck. The church frowned on unlicensed healers, and yet, behind closed doors, even abbots sent messengers for quiet consultation. That's how it worked, a parallel system, whispered and wild, rooted in knowledge older than the priests. Section 20. The sun dips lower, and you find yourself following a narrow track that weaves past the outer homes, places where laborers sleep and livestock mingle almost too comfortably with humans. You pause at a half-sunken fence, watching as a boy and his father wrestle with a stubborn cartwheel. Welcome to the village's bone and muscle, the craftspeople. Unlike the gold-gilded artisans of noble courts, these crafters work with rough hands and quiet persistence. Their tools aren't decorated, they're worn to the grip. You step into a thatched workshop, ducking under the low beam. The air is thick with sawdust and sweat. A man carves a stool leg, his thumb tracing a centuries-old curve. beside him, his daughter sharpens a blade on a whetstone. Not for show, just for dinner prep. Tonight's focus? The blacksmith. His shop is both forge and theater. Sparks fly as he pumps the bellows with one foot, shaping glowing iron into a horseshoe. You stand mesmerized, not by the metal, but by the rhythm. It's not brute force, it's dance. His hammer taps out a lullaby for steel. Fun fact, blacksmiths weren't just farriers or weapon makers. They were often local engineers, fixers of everything from plows to locks. Some even dabbled in rudimentary prosthetics, like leather braces for injured limbs. Historians still debate how many medieval inventions were born not in castles, but in back-alley workshops like this. You stroll next to the weaver's cottage. Threads hang from wooden looms, and the spinning wheel hums like a prayer. Patterns emerge slowly, checkered, striped, or geometric, each one hinting at family identity or local pride. The wool smells earthy. The dye? Beetroot in woad. You admire the boldness of natural color in a gray-toned world. Nearby, a cooper shapes a barrel with deliberate thuds. He doesn't look up, but grunts hello. His staves are soaked in water to keep them from cracking. You watch him seal the lid, thinking about how beer, salted herring, and even pickled eggs depended on such craftsmanship. Without barrels, no trade. Without trade, no feast. Even the cobbler plays a role in village survival. A good shoe can mean the difference between a safe walk to market or a twisted ankle in muddy ruts. His hands are calloused, his eyes squinting, and yet his stitching is precise. He glances up and jokes, "If the Lord wore sandals, I hope they were mine." That's how it is here, humble jobs masking intricate skill. Historians sometimes underplay the creativity of peasants, but you see it everywhere, in the clever use of animal sinew for thread, in roof tiles made from river clay, in toys whittled from firewood scraps. They weren't inventing clocks or cathedrals, but they were solving problems, daily, locally, beautifully. You sit on the edge of a workbench, close your eyes, and let the sounds surround you, scraping, tapping, creaking, huffing. This isn't just labor, it's life, handmade. And it's anything but dull. Section 21. You awaken to the rhythmic clang of church bells echoing across the damp morning air. It's not just Sunday, this is the heartbeat of a medieval village. You follow the sound down a cobblestone path toward the center of town, where a stone chapel rises modestly above the roofs, its steeple reaching like a finger toward heaven. Inside, the pews creak beneath linen tunics and woolen cloaks. No stained glass, just plain, dusty windows that filter in the soft light. The priest's voice murmurs in Latin, soothing, mysterious. You don't understand a word, but the cadence lulls you into stillness. Around you, heads bow not just out of reverence, but out of habit, tradition, and perhaps a bit of hope. This isn't just worship. It's the social glue. Here, villagers meet, confess, gossip, and barter favors. Marriages are arranged, debts are forgiven or remembered longer than any psalm. Religion offers comfort, yes, but also structure and power. Historians still debate how much peasants truly believed the doctrines they heard. Were they devout? Superstitious? Fearful? Or simply following the only story they'd ever been told? What we do know, religion shaped everything from crop planting to childbirth to what herbs you could gather without suspicion. Step into the churchyard now. Rows of wooden crosses mark the resting places of people with short, weather-worn lives. Some are buried with humble tokens, a favorite spoon, a child's carved toy. Others have no names at all. Death was common, but not unnoticed. In one corner stands a weathered stone, its carving nearly worn away. Local legend says it marks the grave of a midwife once accused of sorcery, though no trial was ever held. You run your fingers across the lichen-covered name and wonder, healer or heretic? History never quite decides. Back in the village square, a traveling friar has set up a makeshift pulpit. His voice rises with passion, and a crowd forms. Children giggle at his wild gestures. Some adults frown. Is he a truth-teller, or just another peddler in a robe? You sip watered ale from a communal mug, feeling how deeply faith, real or ritual, threads through everything. Meals begin with blessings. Fields are sown with prayers. Even dreams are chased with chants. And tonight, as stars begin to blink overhead, the last bell tolls in the distance. One long, low note. You close your eyes, letting it echo in your chest like a heartbeat from another world. In this place, belief isn't just in the heavens, it's baked into the soil beneath your feet. Section 22. You find yourself near the village's outskirts, where the thatch grows sparser and the woods begin their slow, creeping claim. Here lives the blacksmith, a man with soot on his skin and sparks in his beard. His forge breathes like a beast, glowing orange with each pump of the bellows. You step inside, and the heat hits you first. Then the noise. The steady ring of hammer on iron is hypnotic. Sparks fly as he bends raw metal into shape, horseshoes, nails, hinges, even tools that make other tools. In this world, he isn't just a tradesman, he's part magician, part mechanic, part surgeon of steel. What he creates doesn't glitter like gold, but it holds the village together. Quite literally. Hinges on doors. Rings on carts. Brackets on barrels. A single misstrike, and a wagon wheel fails. A single cracked blade, and a field lies untilled. You realize, infrastructure begins in flame. You ask about his craft, and he shrugs. My father taught me. His father too. No blueprints. Just muscle memory and the wisdom of glowing metal. But he's also an innovator. He's been experimenting with a new folding technique for plowshares. Something about strength and flexibility. He won't say more, it's a trade secret. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths were respected artisans or glorified laborers. Some say they were essential and revered. Others suggest they lived in isolation, feared for their fire and strength. In some towns, smiths were even barred from testifying in court, thought to be touched by otherworldly forces. You peek at a project in the corner, a curious contraption with rotating parts and strange curves. He's trying to copy a design a traveling merchant described, something from the East, maybe Chinese. You admire the ambition. This isn't just maintenance, it's quiet innovation at the edge of the known world. As you leave the forge, the air cools. The ringing fades. But something lingers. The sense that progress doesn't always arrive with a banner or a speech. Sometimes, it glows in the heart of a village, struck one blow at a time by a man who rarely speaks, but always listens, to the metal, to the heat, to the hush between hammerfalls. And when night falls and his fire dims, he doesn't rest. He repairs the tools of farmers, the hinges of doors, and sometimes, unknowingly, the very spine of the medieval town. Section 23. You wander past the forge and follow a winding dirt path that leads toward the edge of town, where the open commons meet the chapel bell. Here, the space shifts, neither home nor farm, but something in between. You've arrived at the medieval marketplace, a place more alive than anywhere else in the village. It doesn't look like much, wooden stalls draped in linen, baskets of turnips and leeks, clay pots stacked like uneven towers, woolen socks hanging from strings. But the air buzzes with the hum of barter. Voices rise and fall, pleading, haggling, laughing. Chickens cluck beneath a vendor's cart. A dog snores beside a barrel. You pause at a spice seller's booth. He has saffron, cinnamon, and something called grains of paradise, wrapped in oiled cloth and mystery. You ask where it's from. He points vaguely, the coast. Maybe further. You know better, it probably traveled through 3 kingdoms and 2 pirate hands before landing here. Then there's the fishmonger, whose cart smells as though the sea walked inland and decided to nap. He swears today's catch is fresh, even if the fish's eyes disagree. Across from him, a woman sells dyed ribbons and trinkets carved from bone. Children gather near her, fascinated by a dancing wooden fox on a string. Markets weren't just places to buy and sell. They were stages, newsrooms, and theaters. Gossip moved faster here than plague. Who's getting married, who's missing a goat, who insulted the Lord's cousin? It's all here, hidden behind greetings and gestures. You overhear something about a brewing feud between 2 rival bakers. Flour politics. Historians still argue whether medieval markets were engines of economic growth or simply chaotic gatherings. Some see them as sparks of proto-capitalism. Others say they were governed more by ritual and tradition than supply and demand. The truth? Probably both, depending on the time, the town, and the weather. You buy a twist of honeyed almonds, more for the ritual than the taste. As you nibble, you watch a cloth merchant expertly wrap a bolt of linen for a customer, no bag, no tape, just skill. A boy runs by carrying a chicken under his arm like a prize. Somewhere, a lute player strums a lazy tune. Evening creeps in. Stalls pack up. Coins jingle. Leftover bread changes hands for fewer pence. And just like that, the market deflates, not gone, just folded away until the next time. As you turn back toward the village, your almond bag empty, you feel oddly full. Not from food, but from something else, the sense of belonging to a messy, chattering organism. The marketplace wasn't just a place. It was the village's heartbeat, pulsing to the rhythm of trade, talk, and turnips. Section 24. You follow a low stone wall lined with moss, its surface cool to the touch, and find yourself arriving at a strange little outpost, neither shop nor chapel, but something older. It's the town healer's hut, a place where potions meet prayer and science wears a leafy crown. The door creaks as you step inside. Dried flowers hang from the beams like sleepy bats. Vials filled with strange liquids glow faintly in the flickering candlelight. There's a scent here you can't quite place, part clove, part damp soil, part something sharper, like boiled roots. A figure stirs in the corner. Not a witch, not quite a doctor. This is the town's wise woman or wise man, depending on the century. You nod, unsure of the etiquette. They return it with a knowing smile and go back to grinding something that smells like burnt mint. You're not sick. Not exactly. But everyone comes here sooner or later. For a poultice, a charm, a dose of hope. On the shelves, you spot items labeled in rough Latin, salvia, ruta, belladonna. Some are healing herbs. Others could send you into a very long nap. They offer you a tea, warm, bitter, oddly comforting. You sip as they explain its uses, for stomach aches, for dreams, for banishing bad air. You pretend to understand, but mostly you're mesmerized by the way they move, graceful, precise, a kind of domestic alchemy. Did you know medieval medicine blended science, superstition, and storytelling? Some healers used astrology charts. Others relied on saints' relics. You might have been bled by a barber one day, and blessed with yarrow the next. Medical consistency was, let's say, flexible. Historians still argue whether these practitioners were valued or feared. In some records, they're revered as herbal geniuses. In others, accused of sorcery or worse. Some were executed for curing people the wrong way. Others were protected by noble families who swore by their tonics. The healer shows you a charm bag, dried herbs, a coin, a bit of ribbon. For luck, they say. You slip it into your pocket. Why not? Outside, the sky has turned a smoky purple. As you leave the hut, the candlelight behind you dances one last time on the wall. And for some reason, your headache's gone. Or maybe it was never real. Maybe it was just the weight of knowing too much and sleeping too little. Either way, you walk lighter now. The healer doesn't call after you. They already know you'll be back one day, with a question, a bruise, or a dream too loud to ignore. Section 25. The road dips slightly, and your steps echo over cobblestone patched with patches of wild mint. You find yourself at the edge of town again, not the bustling market or the dusty commons, but the graveyard. Or, to the locals, God's Acre. A quiet place. Surprisingly peaceful. Here, gravestones lean like old friends, trading secrets through the wind. Some are carved with angels. Others with skulls. Most bear names you can't quite read, worn away by time, lichen, and 1,000 silent rains. You wander between them, hands behind your back, like you've always belonged here. Burial in the Middle Ages was both solemn and oddly routine. The poor were wrapped in shrouds, not coffins. Buried fast. Sometimes reburied when space ran out. Graves were reused, bones stacked in ossuaries. It's unsettling to modern minds, but back then, it was just practical. You pass a small stone slab with a carving of shears and a comb, perhaps a barber. Another shows a chalice, likely a priest. Symbols told stories when words failed. In a way, these graves were medieval resumes. Then your eye catches something different, a small wooden cross with no name. Just a single shell resting at its base. Children, the unbaptized, and strangers often went unnamed in death. Some were buried outside the churchyard wall. Still sacred, still mourned, but quieter. You pause. Was mourning different back then? Not really. People wept, sang dirges, wore black. But they also told jokes at wakes. Ate meat pies next to the dead. Shared gossip with the grief. Death was constant, so people made peace with it in very human ways. Did you know some medieval folks hired professional mourners? Women who would cry loudly to show status or affection. Others whispered to corpses, believing the soul lingered. Some even buried coins for the journey to the next world, just in case. Historians still debate whether medieval people feared death more or less than we do. Some say they were resigned to it. Others argue that religious teachings made death both terrifying and hopeful, a judgment, but also a reunion. You sit for a moment on a stone bench. No one rushes you. The birds have quieted. The air is thick with stillness, not sadness. Before you leave, you notice a small basket tucked behind a gravestone. Inside, dried lavender, a crust of bread, and a folded scrap of parchment. You don't open it. You don't need to. Someone still remembers. You step back into the road, slower this time. The sky's deep blue now, and the village is mostly asleep. But something in you is settled. Not fear, not longing, just the quiet knowing that every story, even the quietest one, matters. Especially those whispered in the dark. Section 26. You walk past a stable and down a winding lane, where the clatter of hooves has long faded. Tonight, your feet lead you to one of the strangest corners of medieval life, the world of sleep. Not just where people slept, but how and what it all meant. Imagine this, it's midnight in a small cottage. A family lies in a single room, under one thick blanket stuffed with straw or rags. The hearth still glows faintly, casting a flickering orange light. But this isn't the deep, uninterrupted sleep you know. Medieval folks practiced what scholars call segmented sleep. Two distinct sleep phases, separated by a watch-awaking period around midnight when people would pray, chat, smoke, snack, even visit neighbors. Yes, midnight social calls were a thing. You grin at the idea. During this first sleep and second sleep, dreams took on serious meaning. People kept dream books, consulted priests, or whispered interpretations to one another. A dream of teeth falling out? A bad omen. Flying? Possibly divine. Some thought dreams were messages from God or temptations from darker sources. You glance around the room. The bedding is humble, hay, wool, sometimes feathers if you were lucky. Lice and fleas were common bedfellows. People often slept in shifts, especially in inns. Strangers would share a bed, feet to head, with barely an introduction. Still, there was comfort. A favorite blanket. A lullaby hummed in Latin. Perhaps even a pet curled at the feet. Cats weren't just vermin hunters, they were warmth providers, and maybe spiritual guardians in disguise. Did you know some monasteries banned soft bedding altogether? Too much comfort led to sinful dreams, they said. Meanwhile, in Iceland, sagas described sleeping in full armor during winter. Not exactly ideal for REM cycles. Historians still argue whether segmented sleep was universal or regional, whether it vanished due to artificial lighting or changing labor rhythms. Some say it's our natural rhythm, others claim it was a product of hard living. But here's what you feel, standing in the stillness, medieval people were intimate with the night. It wasn't something to be fought with blue light and caffeine. It was a companion. A space between spaces. Someone stirs in the bed nearby. You hear a whispered prayer, half hope, half habit. Then silence. You pull the blanket tighter and let your thoughts drift. Not quite asleep. Not quite awake. This liminal time, this midnight pause, carries a quiet power. Like a forgotten chapter in a book you once loved. And tonight, you find yourself slipping into it, breath slowing, thoughts softening. Not just because of the warmth, but because sleep here feels sacred. Section 27. You wake before dawn, not to the screech of an alarm, but to the muffled shuffle of wooden clogs and the low hum of early risers. Outside, the village is cloaked in blue mist, dew clinging to rooftops, chickens clucking with quiet indignation. Today, you follow the sound of industry, not a blacksmith's hammer or a carpenter's saw, but the gentle rhythm of thread pulling through fabric. It's time to visit the world of medieval textiles. You duck into a small, timber-framed room where women and men alike sit bent over spinning wheels, looms, and needles. The air is rich with the scent of lanolin and flax. A cat snoozes atop a basket of wool. You sit beside a young spinner who's expertly teasing fibers into fine thread. Her fingers move so quickly, they blur. Textiles weren't just clothes. They were currency, status symbols, heirlooms, and even taxes. Kings collected cloth as tribute. Peasants paid rent in woven goods. And monasteries? They became textile powerhouses, with monks and nuns turning out robes that rivaled any artisan's work. Ever worn wool against bare skin? In medieval times, you didn't have much choice. Linen came next to the body, if you were lucky enough to afford it, and wool was layered over that. Cotton was rare in Europe until much later, and silk? A luxury fit only for nobles or clergy. The rest made do with rougher fare, sometimes so itchy you imagine folks scratched themselves in rhythm to mass. And dyeing. Forget the rainbow. Most peasants wore dull browns, grays, and greens, colors derived from plants like nettle or walnut husk. But in cities and courts, indigo, madder red, and the elusive Tyrian purple turned heads and emptied purses. Color meant power. In fact, sumptuary laws banned lower classes from wearing certain hues. A blue tunic might have been illegal if you were born into the wrong family. Do you know the word spinster? It originally meant an unmarried woman who spun thread for a living, a respectable, independent craft. Over time, the word curdled into something pejorative. But here, watching this young woman expertly weave with a steady smile, you realize she's not lonely. She's skilled, strong, intentional. Historians still debate how much men participated in textile work outside formal guilds. In some regions, entire households joined in. In others, textile arts became the quiet domain of women, subtle, powerful, and essential. Suddenly, a soft gust lifts the edge of a cloth drying by the window. Sunlight catches on the threads, and they shimmer like stories stitched into time. You reach out, brush your fingers against the fabric. It's warm. Alive. And as the village hums to life, you carry this feeling. In every stitch lies survival, and in every garment, the memory of hands that labored with care, long before factories hummed and fashion raced. Section 28. You walk now toward the sound of voices rising and falling in practiced rhythm, chanting, not from a church, but from the edge of the town near the river, where the washerwomen are already at work. Their feet are bare, skirts tucked up, arms strong and sure as they slap heavy linens on wide flat stones. This is laundry day in a medieval village, and no, it doesn't smell like lavender and dryer sheets. You kneel beside them and dip your hands into the icy water. It bites. Soap, if you can call it that, is a rough grayish paste made from animal fat and ashes, lye, basically. You watch as one woman rubs it hard into a tunic stained from weeks of wear. She scrubs with such force, you wonder if the shirt will survive. But it always does. Just barely. Washing was a communal ritual, part gossip session, part endurance sport. Women swap news, tell jokes, and sometimes sing ballads to pass the time. And while it may seem quaint, it's not without risk. The river can carry disease. The repetitive work ruins joints. And in winter, hands can go numb or split from cold. You flex your fingers and silently admire their tenacity. Clean clothes were a luxury. Most people owned just a couple of garments, layers were added in winter, and outer layers absorbed most of the grime. Underclothes were washed more often, but bathing? That's a whole different story. You'd be surprised how long people could go without a proper bath, though contrary to myth, they didn't all stink constantly. They knew how to manage odors, with herbs, linen changes, and the occasional quick scrub in a basin. Laundry wasn't just about hygiene. It was also about status. White linen, kept truly white, signaled wealth and free time. Only the rich could afford to hire someone else to handle it. For most, clean meant not filthy, and that was already a win. Did you know that some medieval cities had public laundry houses, sometimes near bathhouses? Or that laundresses were often paid with food or bits of firewood instead of coin? One detail you might not expect: some towns restricted which hours you could wash clothes. Too early and you'd disturb the peace, too late and you'd risk moral suspicion. Apparently, clean socks weren't worth a scandal. Historians still discuss whether laundresses held marginal positions in society or subtle authority. Some were viewed with suspicion, single women, outside often, seen as too independent. Others held respected roles in larger households, managing linens for entire estates. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. A woman next to you laughs and wrings out a dripping tunic with one mighty twist. The water sprays your sleeve, and you don't even mind. You laugh, too. There's a strange joy in this mundane ritual, honest, physical, rhythmic. As the sun climbs higher, steam rises from the damp clothing laid across bushes and lines. The smell of soap, sweat, and fresh air blends into something oddly comforting. You close your eyes for a moment, and the sounds become a lullaby: splashes, chatter, wind through reeds. Not glamorous. Not easy. But real. These were the days most lives were made of, not battles, not kings, but laundry. Section 29. You make your way toward the outskirts of town, where the breeze grows stronger and the ground dips slightly toward the marshlands. The scent shifts: damp earth, rotting reeds, a trace of manure. This is not a place of glory or feasts. It's where the tanners work. Where leather is born from filth. You wrinkle your nose. The stench is legendary. Animal hides, scraped raw, soak in vats of urine, lime, and, if you're lucky, pigeon droppings. Yes, really. The ammonia breaks down hair and flesh, essential for turning floppy skin into tough, usable leather. You peer into one of the pits and immediately regret it. Some things are better imagined than seen. But you stay. Because this, too, is part of town life. A necessary trade, brutal as it may seem. Tanners, often relegated to the edge of town, were vital. Their work clothed knights, shoed peasants, bound books, strung instruments. Without them, a lot of civilization quietly falls apart. A man, sleeves rolled high, lifts a soaked hide with a hook pole. His arms ripple with effort. The skin slaps onto a board, and he begins to scrape it clean with swift, practiced motions. There's rhythm in it. And beneath the grime, a kind of artistry. He glances at you and smirks. You nod back, a silent exchange of respect. Did you know some medieval tanning recipes were guarded like family secrets? Or that certain leathers, soft as velvet, almost scentless, came only from specific tanneries in distant lands? Cordovan from Spain. Morocco leather, prized and perfumed. Prestige hiding in unpleasant origins. Historians still debate whether tanning was considered a truly low profession or simply an inconvenient one. Some records suggest tanners were excluded from guilds, denied burial in certain cemeteries. Others point to wealthy tanner dynasties stinking rich, quite literally. The ambiguity lingers like the scent on your boots. A boy passes with a basket of bark, oak or willow, used for tanning the cleaned hides. He doesn't flinch at the smell. To him, this is normal. You wonder if the people who lived near here ever stopped noticing, or if their noses simply surrendered over time. And yet, there's something grounding about this place. Unpretentious. Honest. The work is rough, the tools simple, the product indispensable. It's a reminder that elegance often has dirty beginnings. That behind every tooled belt or bound manuscript lies a vat of filth and a person who endured it. The sun warms the drying racks, where leather stretches taut like sails. You walk past them slowly, and the air, though acrid, carries stories of shoes worn thin by travelers. of armor wrapped in hide, of drums echoing in distant halls. All beginning here, in mud and mess. Your boots squelch slightly as you turn to leave. A final glance back reveals a dog asleep in the shade of the tannery wall, unmoved by the world's judgment. You smile. Because here, amidst the stink, history breathes rough, raw, and very much alive. Section 30. You stroll into the town's quietest corner where the cobblestones give way to mossy steps in ancient stone. It's the local monastery. The moment you cross the threshold, the air itself seems to soften. A hush, like someone just finished whispering and left the silence behind. The cloister is a square of serenity, with herbs planted in tidy rows, sage, hyssop, chamomile. You brush your hand across the lavender and inhale. Monasteries weren't just spiritual retreats, they were centers of medicine, learning, even agriculture. Think of them as the medieval multi-tools of survival. Inside, the scriptorium glows with lamplight. A monk leans over a manuscript, quill in hand, copying each letter with reverence and precision. You watch the steady motion, ink dipping, feather dancing, lines curving into Latin prayers and herbal recipes. It's mesmerizing. And there, beside him, a manuscript with strange illustrations, tiny men fighting snails, cats playing harps, a bishop being chased by rabbits. This is marginalia, the doodles of the devout. You suppress a laugh. Even in piety, the human urge to doodle prevails. But the work here isn't all prayer and poetry. You wander into the apothecary, where another monk mixes dried nettles with honey. The concoction, he claims, soothes coughs and summons sleep. Shelves line the walls, filled with vials, crushed beetles, powdered bones. You begin to see how monks became some of the era's most trusted healers, accidental pharmacists with a divine calling. Historians still argue whether monastic medicine truly helped the sick or simply comforted them with rituals. Some see monks as early scientists, collecting observations and experimenting with cures. Others insist it was more mysticism than medicine. The truth, as always, lives in the middle. Outside, the bell tolls. Not loud, but steady. Time for vespers. The monks file in, robes brushing stone, faces calm. You slip into a corner pew, just listening. The chant is soft, almost like breathing. No rush. No judgment. Just rhythm. And in that moment, you feel the power of this place, not as an institution, but as a space where silence becomes sacred. A room where people remembered how to pause. How to wait. How to kneel beside a wounded traveler with a salve of mint and prayer. Later, as you wander through the gardens again, you notice an old sundial cracked at its base. Time passes differently here. Slower. Gentler. Not because it has to, but because it can. And maybe, just maybe, that's what people needed most. A breath. A pause. A flicker of candlelight guiding them through the dark. Section 31. You follow a winding path out of town, past the wooden fences and muddy roads, until the forest begins to thicken and the air cools. It's not a royal hunt you're joining, no trumpets or falcons or galloping horses. This is a peasant's forage, and you're here to scavenge supper from the woods. Your boots sink slightly into the damp ground. Around you, trees creak gently in the breeze, and above, a raven gives a bored squawk. In your hands, a wicker basket. Inside? Nothing. Yet. You kneel beside a patch of nettles, carefully. With the right preparation, they'll go into soup. Wrong move? You'll spend the night itching. Nearby, mushrooms tempt you with plump, earthy hats. Are they safe? That's the question every forager has asked for thousands of years. Some old wives say to look for silver turning black. Others? They trust the family dog's reaction. As you gather dandelion leaves and wild garlic, you notice the faint trail of animal tracks. Perhaps a rabbit passed by at dawn. If you're lucky, your snare might catch dinner. If not, well, there's always acorns and dried beans at home. But this is more than hunger, it's knowledge. And for medieval villagers, foraging wasn't a hobby, it was a skill passed down like a sacred rite. Children knew which berries would heal and which would kill. They whispered the names of herbs like prayers, comfrey for bruises, mugwort for dreams, angelica for fevers. Scholars still argue whether this folk knowledge should be considered true medicine or mere superstition. But dig deep enough and you'll find a truth beneath the leaves. These were libraries of survival, carried not in books, but in baskets in memory. You rest on a mossy stump and nibble a sweet tart sorrel leaf. A squirrel scolds you from above. Somewhere in the distance, someone's calling a child home for supper. You wonder what's in their basket tonight. Then you notice something carved into the bark of a tree, a cross. Faint, almost forgotten. Maybe a marker. Maybe a warning. Maybe just someone passing through, needing to leave a sign behind. As the light fades, the forest breathes around you. Not spooky, not threatening, just alive. A living cupboard, a wild kitchen, a place that gives if you know how to ask gently. And when you finally turn back toward the village, your basket isn't full, but it's honest. Mushrooms. Mint. A story or two. You walk slowly, letting the shadows fall across your shoulders like a shawl. You've wandered, listened, picked, and paused. And in this simple act, gathering what the forest allows, you've touched a rhythm older than cities, quieter than kings. Section 32. You wake before dawn, not to the crow of a rooster, but to the soft clatter of wooden tools and hushed voices outside your thatched window. Today is not an ordinary day. It's market day. And in a medieval town, that means something close to magic. You wrap yourself in your coarsest tunic, the one without holes, if you're lucky, and step into the cool morning air. The smell hits first, a blend of hay, fresh bread, cured meats, manure, and the faint sweetness of apples beginning to ferment. Strange how chaos can have a scent. The streets, usually sleepy, now buzz. Carts wobble past, their wheels creaking under sacks of grain. Merchants shout in half a dozen dialects, their tongues dancing between trade, flirtation, and hard-nosed bartering. You pass a man selling candles shaped like saints, a woman hawking goose feathers, and a boy running errands with a wheel of cheese nearly the size of his torso. This is more than buying and selling, it's spectacle. A blacksmith heats horseshoes beside a juggler tossing knives. A friar preaches beside a man selling miracle salves for gout. You're not sure which one you trust more. You stop at a stall of fabrics. The colors dazzle, reds from madder root, blues from woad, yellows from saffron. A wealthy widow inspects a bolt of cloth with the precision of a falcon eyeing prey. You run your fingers over rough wool and wonder if you could trade your barley for a handkerchief. But listen closely and you'll hear something deeper. Deals are struck not just in coin, but in gossip, alliances, and promises. A baker hints at an upcoming wedding. A stonemason seeks laborers for a project tied to a nearby abbey. Someone quietly mentions the arrival of an official from the crown. Ears perk up. Backs straighten. Historians still debate whether these markets were true centers of economic power or simply social glue. Some argue they reinforced hierarchies. Others say they offered rare moments of class mingling and independence, especially for women and foreigners. A little girl tugs at your sleeve, offering a handful of hand-dyed beads. Her smile is missing 2 teeth. You buy them. Not because you need them. Because that's how markets work. A little trade, a little trust, a little wonder. At the edge of the square, a man with a caged fox offers exotic pets. You raise an eyebrow. So does the fox. A traveling bard strums a lute and sings about an emperor who choked on a fishbone. You laugh. You've heard that one before, but somehow it's funnier in the sun. And just as you're about to head home, you notice something odd. A group of scribes copying letters for a few copper coins. Some can't write their own name, but today, they're sending messages across kingdoms. A parchment. A seal. A fragile thread of connection. You pause before leaving the square. The chaos hasn't slowed, but your mind has. This isn't just a place to buy onions or shoes. It's a living chronicle. A loud, colorful, smelly heartbeat of medieval life. As the midday sun settles high, you pull your hood tighter and walk home with your beads, your stories, and the feeling that, just for a moment, you were part of something bigger. Section 33. You return from the market with more than just goods. Your pouch is lighter, sure, but your mind is buzzing, your arms are full, and there's a faint ache in your feet. Yet what draws your attention now isn't food or fabrics. It's the sound of hammering echoing from the town's outer edge. You follow it, past rows of uneven houses and crooked chimneys, to the workshop of the local cooper. The man shapes barrels from curved staves and iron hoops with a precision that's almost poetic. Watching him, you realize this too is history, made quietly with wood, sweat, and patience. Tools in the Middle Ages weren't just instruments, they were lifelines. The blacksmith, with his bellow and anvil, was both artisan and problem solver. He forged nails for roofs, bits for horses, hinges for doors. One spark at a time, the town held together. Further down the street, you pass a carpenter planing a beam. Shavings fall like ribbons. The smell of fresh wood is sharp and comforting. He's repairing a wheel. Or maybe building a door. Or maybe just keeping busy, because in a town where structures lean and sag with the weight of time, someone always needs a board replaced. You spot the potter next, surrounded by lopsided bowls drying in the sun. Some are beautiful, others, well, useful. Glazes shine in brown, green, and the occasional impossible blue. Imported, he whispers. You nod, knowing full well that imported could mean from 2 towns over. One alley leads to the tanner's yard. You catch the scent before you see it, sharp, pungent, somewhere between vinegar and nightmares. Animal hides soak in vats. A young apprentice stirs with a long pole, face scrunched. The result? Leather for shoes, belts, pouches, and more. Not glamorous, but essential. Did you know tanners sometimes use dog urine in their process? You gag slightly. Then chuckle. Medieval life wasn't always romantic. Historians still debate whether these craftspeople were respected middle-class artisans or simply skilled laborers clinging to survival. Some records paint them as community pillars. Others suggest their status rose and fell like the tides, depending on their patronage and luck. As you walk, you notice the rhythm of the town is tied to these crafts. A bellows huffs. A chisel taps. A wheel creaks. In a world without machines, people were the gears. The labor was loud, slow, and strangely meditative. A young girl skips past with a bundle of rushes, bound for a thatcher. Roofs weren't just covered, they were woven, layered, and maintained with rituals older than the town itself. You wave to the thatcher on the ladder. He tips his hat with a rye-straw grin. Then comes the sound of glass shattering. A groan. A boy's voice says, "I'll fix it." You peek into a glazier's stall, where shards sparkle like stars. Colored glass wasn't just for cathedrals. Even humble homes had windows of horn, oiled cloth, or tiny panes, each one expensive, precious. You sit for a moment beside a stonemason chiseling a lintel. The dust settles into the folds of his clothes. Each strike of his hammer carries weight, literally and metaphorically. These stones outlive kings. This one's for the baker's new hearth, he says. You smile, imagining bread baking beneath it someday. The sun dips lower. Work slows. Tools are cleaned, hands are wiped, jokes are traded. The workshop doors creak shut, not locked, just latched. Trust, it seems, is another tool they've all learned to handle. You walk back with a quiet admiration. These people didn't just build things. They built time hour by hour, plank by plank, stitch by stitch. And their fingerprints are all over the bones of the town. You brush sawdust from your sleeve. Somehow, it feels like a blessing. Section 34. The streets are quieter now. Chimneys puff their evening sighs, casting soft trails into the lavender sky. You drift toward the edge of the town where the river hums its ancient lullaby, winding past old stones and mossy banks. Here, beside the water, another life unfolds, one stitched with silence, solitude, and sacred duty. You arrive at the abbey. It's not grand. No gilded spires or flying buttresses. Just thick stone walls, a modest bell tower, and a wooden gate that creaks open with effort. Inside, you find peace not carved by power, but by repetition. Chants, bells, ink, silence. A monk passes, barefoot on cold stone. He nods gently, and you follow his path through cloisters where ivy drapes like lace. A fountain gurgles softly in the center courtyard. You sit beside it. Water here is more than hydration, it is memory, ritual, and scripture. Inside the scriptorium, a candle burns low. One man copies a manuscript letter by letter. His quill moves with reverence, as if each stroke might crack open heaven. The Latin is indecipherable to you, but the intent is clear, this is worship in ink. Did you know some monks painted tiny devils dancing in margins? Or rabbits jousting with snails? Illuminated manuscripts weren't always solemn. Sometimes they were cheeky, personal, quietly rebellious. You lean closer, smiling at a monk's miniature mischief from 800 years ago. A bell rings. Vespers. You move into the chapel. The benches are smooth from centuries of prayerful wait. The air is cool, thick with incense and damp stone. A hymn begins, not booming, but tender. Male voices rise and fall like breath. You don't understand the words, but you understand the peace. Historians still debate how much influence monasteries had on rural communities. Were they sanctuaries of learning and medicine, or isolated bubbles detached from real needs? Some say monks preserved civilization. Others argue they hoarded knowledge like relics. But here and now, you witness something softer, a candle lit for someone who died, a poultice mixed for a sick farmer, a page turned under moonlight. Behind the abbey, the garden awaits. It's neat, functional, yet full of life. Rows of herbs, sage, mint, hyssop. Bees hum lazily from flower to flower. You pluck a leaf and rub it between your fingers. The scent is sharp, grounding. Medicine grows here, not in flasks, but in soil. Nearby, a nun tends the vines. Yes, some abbeys had nuns too. She doesn't speak. Just smiles and keeps pruning. Vows of silence weren't about withdrawal, you realize, but about tuning into the softer sounds of the world. You peer into the infirmary. There's a man wrapped in linen, moaning faintly. A young novice applies a honey salve. It was believed to cleanse wounds, and modern science agrees. You're amazed, again, by how much wisdom hid in old hands. The moon is high when you return to the cloister walk. Shadows stretch long. The abbey is quiet now, save for the river's whisper and the rustle of wind through laurel leaves. You think about the people who walked these stones centuries before. Some came to pray. Some to learn. Some to hide. All of them, in some way, sought comfort. And in that, they are no different from you. You leave the abbey gently, pushing the gate closed behind you with a reverent hand. The latch clicks. The wind carries the echo. And as you wander back into town, you feel calmer, not because of the answers you found. Section 35. You make your way back through the winding lanes of the town, now barely illuminated by flickering lanterns and the soft gleam of a low-hanging moon. The cobblestones, worn smooth by centuries of feet, feel almost warm beneath your soles, though the night has grown cool and still. You drift past sleeping houses, their shutters drawn tight, roofs sagging gently under age and memory. Here, time moves like syrup. You pause outside a workshop where the scent of wood lingers from the day's labors. Somewhere behind the wall, a child stirs in their sleep. A dog sighs. And all is calm. This is where the day ends, not with fireworks or finality, but with a slow exhale. A murmur. A hush. Tonight, you've seen the town's beating heart, its kitchens and markets, its latrines and churches, its tiny joys and quiet sufferings. But there's still one last story to tell. Or maybe, to close. You find yourself at the town's edge again, where a lone shepherd sits under a tree, his flock nestled like scattered stones. He doesn't speak. He only nods at you, as if to say, it's enough now. And it is. So now, let's slow everything down. Let the streets blur behind you like a soft watercolor. Let the lanterns become distant stars. Let the cold melt from your shoulders. Breathe. Feel the straw mattress waiting. Hear the soft rustle of linen. The world can wait till morning. Let the names fade, the peasants, the friars, the cheesemakers, the scribes. Let the arguments of historians quiet into background static. Let your eyelids grow heavier. Let your mind settle in the warm folds of old wool and wood smoke and lavender. You are safe. You are tired. You are here. And here is enough. Good night.